Good afternoon to everyone. This is Marco Angeben, Head of Business Development and Regulatory Affairs at European Data Warehouse and the Project Coordinator for Engage for ESG. We'll leave a couple of minutes to let the persons to dial in to this first of a series of webinars focusing on the Engage templates version 1.0. So bear us with for a couple more minutes and then we will get started. Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. So I think we are now ready to go. So today we will focus on the Engage templates, the version 1.0 that has been registered with the Spanish authorities. What is the template about? Well, it's regarding the taxonomy compliance. This is for mortgages and also for home loan renovations. And today I have the pleasure of having with me two colleagues that have been involved in the preparation of the templates, and more specifically, Vincent Mahir. He is basically head of energy efficiency and regulatory technology at Hyperport, and also Gianluca Ginelli. He's a manager in the structured finance team at European Data Warehouse. Those are the two persons that really spent hours and days to create the specific template with respect to the EU taxonomy compliance. So today we have quite a busy agenda. I just want to go through the main points. Really, we are going to look at from a Vincent perspective some very important developments, not only in terms of structured finance, but really also regarding sustainable finance. As you know, there are a lot of directive regulations currently that are being implemented or clarification made available. And then we look really, we have a closer look in terms of the Engage templates, and in particular the substantial contribution criteria. The focus of today, because we have let's say 1 hour or a little bit less than 1 hour, is going to be on the various articles of the Climate Delegated Act, including then also the minimum safeguards. And then we look at the templates, the example, and what's coming next. As I said, this is the first of a series of webinars that we have. The webinars are recorded, and also there is going to be made a presentation available also on the Engage website later this week, so that you don't need to take any kind of notes. So now regarding Engage, you know that Engage, this is a project that is financed from the European Commission and include six partners. But the reality of the fact of the matter is that we are trying to make applicable and easy to report the taxonomy with respect to mortgages and home loan renovations. So in terms of looking it from a perspective of the asset, the liability, and also the documentation. And in terms of the project, we have now ticked the box because we have now finalized the first version of the of the templates. And actually, from a timing perspective, also next month we will have a mock-up of the Engage portal, which is the portal which will be used to collect the information regarding from the pilots, the two official pilots, i.e. from WONU and UCI, but also from any other pilots that are interested to test the template and to learn whether their mortgage portfolio or their or the home renovation loans are taxonomy compliant or not. Okay, so this is the broad overview, and now really you can dwell into the templates. And I pass the ball over to Vincent.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. So I want to talk with you about the Engage template structure that we have designed. Some of you might have participated in the past in the webinar we've organized in the midst of December, but maybe not all of you. So I just want to recap a couple of elements there. So what we try to do in our design process is that we wanted to leverage existing disclosure for mortgage loans in Europe. So just to not reinvent the wheel and basically, create an add-on for this for energy performance and climate-related data. And we've divided that into asset, liability, and basically, transaction structure or documentation data. So really dovetailing the best of both worlds together. So just the missing elements as an add-on to the existing templates. An example of this that we used as a starting point for this leveraging of existing disclosure standards has been the securitization regulation disclosure format. It's important for me to say that we're not solely focused on securitization, but all loans, mortgage loans in general. But we've used this as a starting point because this is the most granular level that is used throughout Europe when it comes to mortgage reporting on an asset level. So this add-on is basically extending what is, for instance, if we look into the asset disclosure for securitizations, it's commonly used, the Annex 2. We've added additional fields to the collateral and the loan level information. We'll give some examples later on in the second half of this meeting, but also some aggregated data with relating to the transaction structure and the documentation related to, let's say, the ESG elements of the portfolio. So a little bit depending on what kind of structure there is, you can only use it for the assets, but you can also use the Engage format for the assets and the liability. So in that way, we've created it to be as flexible as possible. Use it only for assets, asset and liabilities, or also with documentation structure. And the idea is that therefore we can accommodate the most prevalent funding structures in Europe, be it asset-backed securities, covered bonds, but also on-balance market portfolio books or mortgage funds. So before we get into that, we're gonna give you a short update on what we think are highly relevant items when looking at compliance or disclosure for mortgages in Europe today. So the first one, for those that might have missed it, is that at the beginning of this month, early March, the ESMA, the Security Market Authority, has published a delegated regulation, basically supplementing the securitization regulation. So just to give a little bit of background, according to the SFDR, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, securitizations are not investment products, so they don't fall under the disclosure obligations of the SFDR. Well, ESMA found, and the European Commission found, that this was a unintended consequence of earlier regulation. So they've come up with some additional, what they call principal adverse impact indicators to report it for STS securitizations. That's something that I wanted to highlight here. And this is something we're also going to incorporate in the next version in April of the Engage template. I'll give you an example here in the screenshots. Reporting on fossil fuels and the energy efficiency and energy inefficiency of the portfolio. And the interesting thing is that the delegated regulation directly points towards the SFDR RTS with regards to the definitions that needs to be applied. So I think that's a really interesting development. Then some relevant sustainable finance developments. Well, one, I think since our last webinar in December, the ECB has published their climate and nature plan roadmap. I highly recommend everyone to have a look into this relatively short document, but I think that sets the path forward in terms of monetary policy and really has some extensions with regard also to, let's say, the world of mortgages. A few items we have highlighted. I think one that is really interesting is also the incorporation of the EU taxonomy, specifically the introduction of climate-related disclosure requirements for the collateral framework. So I think for those parties that are interested in things like using the collateral framework, I think it's highly relevant that this is closely monitored and closely followed, these developments here. And this is something, of course, also something that we are currently incorporating already in the Engage template. A second one, and I think this is a really big one, is that we are getting into the next steps of the Energy Performance for Buildings Directive, the fourth recast. And well, the European Parliament has adopted this regulation, so we're almost into the step that this will be voted upon next month. If we look at the latest proposal, which has been watered down quite severely compared to the previous versions published by the Council previously. But I think there are definitely some interesting elements. Still, all buildings in Europe needs to be zero emission buildings by 2050. That's, of course, I think the most important sentence in this directive. But what might be interesting, I think, with respect to compliance here is that there will be a harmonization of energy performance methodologies among member states, but no harmonization among EPC classes. Slight nuance, but I think a very important nuance, for instance, in reporting on the sustainability characteristics of mortgages in Europe. And just to highlight maybe one important element here, is of the latest text that is available on the European Commission website, is the text that is right. The text that is right here that we have included, and that is that member states shall ensure easy and free of charge access to the full energy performance certificate for building owners, tenants and managers, and to financial institutions as regard to buildings in their investment and lending portfolios. So I think that's really an interesting development, and we shall see if this makes it into the final version. I think this is for a lot of people among us really important topics, because the governance with respect to EPC related data is not really something that has been addressed in this directive in the third version or in any intermediate version, either from the Council or the EP before this. So that's definitely on top of our list, because this directly ties into, let's say, the consequences if you look at it from a GDPR or data governance perspective. The 12th of April, we will know more. And then I think the third and last publication that we want to highlight here is the publication of the draft Commission notice, informally known as the Q&A. That was published on the 21st of December. Well, I do want to highlight a couple of elements from this publication because they are directly relevant for residential real estate finance. We have created a top 6 of findings that we deem relevant, and we want to shortly look at them because we think these are directly tied into reporting. And well, I've listed them here on the screen. We go into each 6 of them. These are answer 19, 20, 22, 23, 34, and 37. Just to go through them relatively quickly, start with the first one. For those that might not have seen it, I'll go through it relatively quickly, but we'll also circulate the link to the exact document, the Commission Notice document later on. So first, that we want to highlight is 19. So when changes to the NZEP criteria are carried through in a specific member state, let's say at the national level, a reassessment of the taxonomy alignment of the assets will need to be done. And I think this is a very important answer because I think many of us were wondering to what degree or to which frequency we needed to update this reassessment of taxonomy alignment. I think also relevant, let's say for countries like, give example, Spain, where there's maybe not always a national methodology, just like in Belgium, but the criteria change per jurisdiction. So I think the answer remains there, that every time that changes, a reassessment needs to take place. 2, answer 20. And this ties in a question on how to assess the top 15 criterion. And the question was basically, can we look at the top 15% and also include an asset with an energy label A? And how should we basically use both of these criteria when reporting on taxonomy alignment? Well, and here the Commission has highlighted that financial undertakings can choose any method they want to apply, whether it's the EPC class of A or the top 15%, but they cannot double count it. So this is, I think, really important. Also, in talking to the accountants on this, you cannot double count it. So yeah, it's really important to track which variant of 7.7 you are selecting, Class A or the top 15, but without double counting. Luckily, the template that we've designed already accommodates the distinguishes between these two, let's say, options. Third, this is answer 2022, and I think is highly relevant in the conversations that we have had with a lot of the financial institutions throughout Europe. A question that came up very regular. So, the estimation or the extrapolations of EPCs, is this allowed? And well, the Commission notes here that estimation for taxonomy alignment is not allowed. It is allowed for what they call reporting on a voluntary basis, but we are a little bit more interested in the involuntary reporting, and there this is not allowed. So I think, this really sets the tone towards how strict is the taxonomy. How strict should we apply the criteria? So these are definitely some interesting takeaways. Fourth, answer 23. So what if we have some EPCs in our portfolio of Class A, which are relatively energy efficient, but have been expired? Usually EPCs in Europe expire after a certain date, typically around after 10 years, they expire and not legally valid anymore. Is it then let's say, an alternative or an option to put them automatically in the top 15 for reporting purposes? And here the Commission has noted that that is not allowed automatically per se. So I think also this is really a very relevant and practical question in assessing taxonomy alignment for existing buildings. Good to keep in mind. So we really need sufficient evidence that a certain building unit is within the top 15 and not just put them in the top 15 purely because it was, but we still basically need some proof to back that statement up. The fifth, answer 34. Again, this is a remark about the frequency to which the alignment should be assessed. And I think a welcome answer here is that there's some clarity that it should be done annually, that that we have to check and reassess the data that has been used for taxonomy alignment. I think this is also a little bit in line with expectations, let's say for annual accounting, which is also typically annually, but good to have it in writing. And then I think sixth, answer 37, which is maybe a surprise to some. It was a little bit for us in our consortium. Yeah, and this is a comment that was made on compliance with minimum safeguards. We copied and pasted the remarks here in the presentation. This is not the full answer because that was quite long, so I just want to give that as a little bit of a disclaimer, but we've highlighted the most important elements of the answer the Commission gave. So an entity that claims that an activity is taxonomy aligned, let's say a financial institution, must check also the minimum safeguards when, and then the example is given, when, for instance, a loan is provided to a retail client for a solar panel. And I think this is a little bit of a surprise because normally the technical screening criteria would only, really direct criteria towards substantial contribution and do no significant harm. And there are no technical screening criteria per se for minimum safeguards, but there's now actually really depending on the economic activity, let's say funding renovation, now an obligation to check whether that activity is in line with minimum safeguards. So yeah, that's, I think, really an interesting one. And it makes it, let's say, potentially challenging to designate a renovation as green or sustainable. So we have at the end of our presentation an ability also to ask a question. So if you have any question or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. For now, we will, unless there are already, we will continue. A short recap actually on the first version of the template that we have published at the end of last year. So we have published a first version of the template, including some guiding documentation, and we'll put on our website also some example files. The reason why we publish this on our website is because one, I think what we have done, which was quite some work, is really try to convert the taxonomy regulation into data requirements, and that entails to do a lot of interpretation, and in some cases maybe even making some assumptions. And sometimes these assumptions are based on general experiences, and sometimes on things we have read, let's say, in other related documents, such as Q&As or commission notice documents. So all these background informations are provided in this document. So you can almost look at this as a RTS, but it's not a R in the sense that it's regulatory, but our reporting technical standards for the template, the first version. Maybe good to explain, I'll go through this very, very shortly, but the template that we've designed is not only based on the Climate Delegate Act or the taxonomy, but also on Q&As that have been published earlier. So I'd like to distinguish this here. A few slides or a few minutes ago, we talked about a commission notice that was published the end of last year, December 2023. Technically seen, that was a commission notice on the Disclosure Delegated Act, the DDA, and a year earlier, before this, European Commission published a Q&A on the Climate Delegated Act, the CDA, which was a little bit more really on the criteria. So we have incorporated both in our template. And just really quickly to highlight, because we've been through this in December in our webinar, but the most important ones that we found in the 2022 Q&A we've highlighted here and really resolve around how to identify, for instance, the construction of new buildings, but also what thresholds should be used for assessing NZEP, and how to assess building date. And there we found, for instance, that the submission of the application date for a building unit is relevant to assess which criteria to apply. If you'd like to learn more about this, have a look in the commission notice or our summary that we did last December in that webinar. But I highlighted the most important one because they really fed into the most important decisions for us in designing the template. I give you one example that's really, I think, really important also with the preparation of the green asset ratio currently. And that's really on when to use 7.1 substantial contribution criteria versus 7.7. And really this resolves about who receives the financing. If we really take a close look into the Q&A, is this the undertaking or the homeowner? This really prescribes whether we should assess the criteria of 7.7 or 7.1. So that's just, I think, a good example of the nuances that we've incorporated also in the template. And I go quickly through this and quite quickly because one, we did this already in December in the webinar, but also it is listed in our guiding documentation. And this is our assessment or basically our interpretation of the taxonomy that we have converted into concrete data requirements. I'll start with 7.7, and that's also basically the scope of the first version of our template. We have for now only focused on the element of substantial contribution. So that's existing building and new buildings and not renovations yet. And we have also not incorporated the do no significant harm criteria yet. The reason why we started with 7.7 is that we think this is the largest, really the largest chunk of the European balance sheets that is potentially green or potentially taxonomy aligned. But there's also another reason. And that's that loans that are to be designated as 7.7 can be attributed as being fully green for the full balance of the loan amount. Contrary to renovation loans, where we can only attribute a fraction of the loan that's really actually green towards the alignment amount. So long story short, there's large territories to win here in converting your portfolio green, really by starting with 7.7. Additionally, these would also be the criteria that were to be applied for funding new buildings in Europe if you want to designate them as green or sustainable. So that's why we started with 7.7. Now, with all the details of the CDA and the DDA and the corresponding Q&As, we came to the conclusion that we can chop these criteria up in 3 subsections. That's 7.7.1, buildings built before 31st of December, where we can either designate a building that has an EPC of Class A or as an alternative is within the top 15% in a certain jurisdiction. That's the second alternative. Or option 2 for buildings built after 31st of December 2020, we have to apply the criteria that is listed in 7.1. So already you see here, it's a little bit of a puzzle, this whole regulation, but we try to make an overview on how we interpreted and how we converted this in direct data criteria in our template. If we were to make a decision tree, we have to assess for 7.7 per building unit in our portfolio whether that building was built before the 31st of December or after that specific date. And how do we do that? Well, by looking at the date of the application of the construction permit as the Q&A has listed. So we have to assess that to know where we are in the decision tree. And based on that, we have a couple of options. If it's built before 31st of December, again, does the EPC have a class A, or is it within the top 15% of the lowest operational prime energy demand? Then we can designate them as green for the substantial contribution criteria. And for buildings built after 31st December 2020, we have to do another check basically on the prime energy demand and whether it's 10% lower than the national threshold. The 3 flavors are listed here. So without going too deep here, because we did this in the last webinar, we highlight, and this is also in our documentation here, what additional data fields we have identified. We try to keep these data requirements really at a bare minimum, also not to overly burden the reporting work that needs to be done. But let's say the additional fields that we've identified are listed here in the table on the right-hand side in green. So the fields that you see, some of them are quite typically already used in a lot of reporting requirements. For instance, what is the loan identifier, what is the cutoff dates, etc. But really based on the regulation and the commission notes and Q&As, we've identified some additional data fields, basically your ingredient list on how to assess this. So construction year, your construction permit application date as the Q&A prescribes, EPC class, etc., whether the EPC is still valid. So as you can see here, we've converted this into 4 or 5 additional criteria. Also, as a last field, you see here the environmental objectives. So purely to really identify, which my colleague will show in a minute, is this for climate change mitigation? Currently, there's only a green asset ratio reporting obligation for the first environmental objective of the EU taxonomy, but we hope they will communicate let's say, the reporting timelines in the future for the other environmental objectives. So also for the other criteria, we made up a proposal on reporting, really distilled from the Q&A and all the, let's say, the regulatory drill downs. You can read our assessment of the criteria. So for instance, the top 15% here, and also came up with some data fields, how to identify a building unit or a loan towards a building unit, whether it's in the top 15 or not. In this example, we have divided that into the green fields, which are on a collateral level or building unit level. And then as the Q&A really ask for additional public guiding documentation, we have also incorporated some fields for information on that level as well. And similarly for buildings built after 31st of December, where we have to assess criteria for new buildings, we have taken a similar approach. There we have basically, well, as you go back with 7.7, we have to look into 7.1, indicated here by the green arrow. And here we have to check whether the prime energy demand is at least 10% lower as set in the national threshold. Again, here, we've converted that into data fields on a collateral building unit level and have added that into our template. So what I wanted to basically conclude here, it's not so much the template, only a set of reporting fields, but I really want you also to look at this as a, let's say, an ingredient list. And that's really a big, let's say, deliverable for ourselves in the Engage Consortium that we're continuously working on. How can we make the, let's say, sometimes somewhat complicated regulation tangible and convert this into concrete data requirements. And we do this with a phased approach, starting with substantial contribution, and really try to communicate that transparently to all the stakeholders. And lastly, I want to give you an example here. We took a similar approach on the minimum safeguards here, where there's also additional proof basically needed to adhere to the minimum safeguards if you want to prove full taxonomy alignment. Now, this, I want to say, is a really good example also for the next webinar, where we'll also talk about renovations, because as we've just seen in the Q&A on the Disclosure Delegated Act, now for renovations, we have to also assess the minimum safeguard. So I think this is, again, a really tangible example of really the complications that can come forward in assessing taxonomy alignment with the latest Q&A. And with this, I would like to give the word to my colleague to show something of the template.
Thanks, Vincent, a lot for your intervention. So now we are going into the templates. As Vincent was mentioning, we have explained the logic of the templates themselves, but now with Gianluca, really, we will delve into the Excel and how is the structure and how you can use them for different type of building, new, existing, or renovations as well.
Thanks, Marco. Yes, exactly. So now we want to show you the template, but before, just last slide. So basically, the template obviously is an Excel file, but we have prepared a sort of taxonomy that helps you to navigate through this file. And the guidance that you should, let's say, follow are exactly these 4 columns, where basically helps you to identify immediately which are the data points that you need to, let's say, collect to assess if the loan is eligible or not according to the regulation that we explained before. So the Climate Delegate Act and the Q&A published. So now we move to the Excel file. Okay, so as the first things, we will show you the part related to the engage template. So as you can see, we have some data points here in column D, A, and F. You will see the code of the field name, and the content of the report. And for those of you that are familiar with the ESMA templates, we have decided to keep more or less the same logic. So each, let's say, field contains a sort of a description and a sort of acronymus that tells you the information that you should put. Also, we have decided to keep the ND distinction. So in case you don't have the information or if the information is not relevant or available, you can decide the option between from ND1 to ND5. So ND5, it means that is not relevant for you, this specific data point. But also we have added the other 2 options, ND6 and ND7, in case you cannot disclose this information. Then we have also the format of the field here, column K. Here, nothing to add. It's really close to the logic that you see in the ESMA templates. And what is relevant is exactly what we presented in the slide. So the column that helps you to navigate. So, for example, if you want to select the fields that you need to complete for assessing the 7.7.1 criteria, so EPC equal to A, you simply filter for this column and you get the information. In case you have to select the top 50% criteria, you simply select the other column. and same criteria in case you need to check the 7.1 criteria. So the case where the primary energy demand needs to be lower than 10% of the NZ. And here is basically an example. Later here we have the governance file, the minimum safeguard fields that Vincent mentioned before. Also here we can say that you have a sort of integration with the top 50 criteria, but also other data requirements. This version of the template, it's fully available for the download, so you can definitely reach out directly the Engage portal, the Engage website, or send an email to the contacts that we have in the PowerPoint presentation. Here in the template, you can also navigate. And the other tab, for example, here you can see the decision tree, for example. Basically is the same concept that is exactly the same that Vincent presented, but with more details. And basically that's all regarding the templates. Obviously, there are other aspects to explain, but this is something, let's say, more relevant in a one-to-one section. So we are also available in case you would like to join for this kind of session. The last point I would like to show you are the templates, not, let's say, the description of the fields and how to navigate into it, but the information that you have to fill out. So we have decided to keep everything very, very simple. So we will have two CSV file, one specifically for the engaged fields. So as you can see here, this field is exactly the same one that we have here. So with this file, obviously you can recreate what you need to compile here. But to show you that we are ready to receive the data and that everything is really, really simple. This is the engage part, and this is the governance file. Also, these two documents are available for download in case you would like to have, let's say, in case you would like to see it. As last point is the concept of the building block. So what I showed you before is the engage part, but as we said, we would like that the engage is a sort of add-on to the ESMA templates. So in case we are talking about transaction that also, let's say, are a securitization, in case the loan are securitized, you can also provide this information, let's say the ESMA part. And obviously we are talking about residential buildings. This means that we are using the Annex 2. But in case your loans are not securitized, you obviously don't need to fill out all of these templates, but you can simply go in this column L, and you can immediately see the minimum amount of fields that you should provide to, let's say, to use the platform. But in case you don't have also this part of information, we are obviously flexible, but at the moment we would like to receive at minimum information, not only relative to the collateral, but also related to the borrower. Having said that, I go back to the presentation. The example we have just discussed it, and what's next? Yeah.
Thanks, Luca. This is great. So as you can clearly see, we made a lot of progress, but I just wanted to explain really in few words how you can engage with the initiative, because as part of the initiative, clearly we have 6 partners, of which 2 are the pilots, one and the UCI. But it's also possible to not only to have the possibility of downloading the template. You just go on the Engage for ESG website, but you can also have a one-to-one session where we go through all these details, and you can clearly also ask specific questions on the interpretation of the templates. And then we're actually getting more and more requests also to have additional pilots from across Europe. That will be possible, let's say, by also signing a specific dedicated agreement, and hence you will be able to submit a sample file, let's say, for a EU taxonomy assessment. So as you can see here, we have also coming up other webinars. We will continue to update you, in particular on the part related to the renovation loans, but also we will be able to provide you some information related and some sneak preview of the Engage portal that we are developing to collect the information from the various pilots. So you can go again on the Engage for ESG website and register for the various sessions. There is one a month. Next is 24th of April. Then on the 29th of May, and last but not least, the 25th of June. Again, we're going to have a presentation, and the session will be recorded and made available to you also afterwards. I'm just checking whether there are any questions in the chat, but it doesn't look like. No, there are no questions. So I think I would like to thank all of you that have been participating, and in particular Vincent and also Gianluca for their contribution to today's presentation. We will continue keeping you updated with the latest developments on sustainable finance and the regulations. Clearly, Brussels at the moment is also very busy, and we will see how we interpret, in particular, the Q&As in the template themselves. So thank you again, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.